This is the Porsche Cayman. It's the entry-level Porsche, the one that gets you onto the Stuttgart ladder, the affordable one.
No, that's not quite true. We were going to make a film today about how this is the basic Porsche, but that it's really good. It is an attainable sports car that we'd all want to drive and could perhaps afford. But then we got through the specs and information about this car. Well, it's 55 grand.
Yes, that's right, £55,000 for the most entry level of Porsches. The car that comes with a small 2-litre 4-cylinder engine like a Toyota GT86. So you're not even getting a big 6-cylinder anymore. Okay, so there's 300 horsepower from that engine and 380 newton meters of torque, but that's good because the Cayman weighs 1,365 kilograms, which is around 200 kilograms more than its rival, the Alpine A110, at its most lardy. And that car costs 9 grand less.
Well, I guess that's that then. The Porsche Cayman is not the attainable sports car for the masses that we thought it was. I guess that's the end. Whoa, come back. Okay, maybe that's not quite being fair on this car. To illustrate what I mean, I brought along Goodwood's high-tech calculating board. Because if you dig deeper into some of those numbers, you'll find there's a few hidden things. We'll start off with some of Porsche's favourite things, acronyms. There's PDK and PASM. Now that's Porsche Doppelkopplung or Porsche Active Suspension Management. Now you know what those are, I'm sure, but just in case, it is the dual clutch gearbox and the fancy self-adjusting dampers. Those are £2,000 and £1,010 each. But it's a small sports car, so you want a manual, and the normal dampers are perfectly fine. Porsche knows how to damp a car, so we can get rid of that. Oh, there's another acronym, PTV, Porsche Torque Vectoring. That's another £926. Basically means in a corner it'll brake the wheels for you to help you get around, but you can turn a steering wheel, you don't need that. Oh, then there's the wheels, £1,734 and another £800 just because they're black. Get rid of those. Then there are some of the slightly smaller things. Cruise control, it's a sports car, don't need that, £200. Climate control with 2 zones. It's barely big enough to have a single zone, £500 lost. Tinted rear lights, why? £434. A speed limit reader that never actually works, £236, and Isofix.
By the time you've added all those savings, the story's a little bit different.
If you buy a Porsche Cayman and you can live without those wheels and you can somehow survive without slightly tinted rear lights and you can change gear yourself, it'll cost you £45,000. And suddenly, that's cheaper than an Alpine A110 and is actually cheaper than a well-spec'd Kia.
At this point, I started looking at the car a little differently. Perhaps then, this car could be the one we're hoping for, just not this car, not this exact car. Maybe a Cayman is still a car you could aim for.
So what does the basic Porsche feel like? Well, and this is going to shock you, it feels like a Porsche. Yep, in fact, I could go as far as to say that the 718 right now is the most engaging car in Porsche's range. There's some quite chunky rubber on the front of this, so when you're manoeuvring at first, it does feel a little bit jerky, but that all starts to make sense the moment you get to a corner. At that point, you can dig the nose in with far more aggression than you might normally expect from a mid-engine car. You can just turn in and get lots of bite with very, very little even whiff of understeer. In fact, you sort of turn it in as hard as you want and then just keep holding on until your knuckles are as white as they're ever going to be. The engine, get it in the right range and, well, you can add a little more rotation with a lift or a extra bit of power, but it's more about the mid-corner balance. The way this thing, like some kind of witchcraft, just keeps sticking. And that torque vectoring from braking, you can feel it just a little bit. It's definitely just trying to edge you back into line, but nothing more than that. Nothing really massively perceptible. The ride is very good in its normal mode. In fact, I've very rarely even thought about pushing the button that turns on the fancy self-adjusting dampers. It just soaks up all the lumps and bumps quite happily, and there's very little roll to think about. So that's quite a lot of money you could save for yourself there. It's not perfect. There's the engine, which is just a little uninspiring. It's obviously not going to be quite as sonorous as a 6-cylinder would be, even with the added extra cost of this sports exhaust. It's just a little bit flat. It doesn't have that same spark. And it's not just the sound, it's the way that it delivers its power. And its biggest problem is that Porsche makes a couple of 718s with the big 4-litre 6-cylinder from the Porsche 911, and those are magnificent. With this, it's heavily turbocharged, and all the power is sort of above 2,500 to 3,000 RPM, so you've got to wait or be in the right gear, and if you stick your foot down, the PDK will, if it's not in sport mode, take a couple of moments to think about it, and it just feels a little bit sluggish. But that would be solved by just having a manual. Then you could stick it in any gear you liked, then you'd save £2,000. That said, when you do find that rev range, there is more than enough slug from the middle of this car. It has quite a lot of power. It will do 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. Once you drive this car for a little while, it's really not hard to dig underneath and find the extremely good base car beneath it. The engine, if you live with the noise, is very good. It's not as fun as, say, an Alpine A110, and there is extra weight. It's heavier than an A110, and it's heavier than the old Cayman, but that's 25 kilograms, and you don't really notice it over the old car. You do notice it over the Alpine, but then the Alpine has an interior that's made up of Renault parts bin bits from 2009. To compare that to the interior of this, well, it wouldn't be fair, because this interior is really nice. I actually think I prefer it to the current 911 because it's just simpler for a simpler car. 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds is only 0.7 seconds slower than a base 911. And this car, even this one spec'd up to the amount that it is nearly £30,000 cheaper than a 911.
In spite of that incredible options list, the standard kit is actually acceptable. There's aircon, a digital trip meter, LED headlight, sat-nav, phone integration, voice control, Apple CarPlay, digital radio, and an 8-speaker audio system.
Okay, so it's not quite as fun as the Alpine, but then the Cayman comes with a manual gearbox, so that's a pretty big tick over the A110 that doesn't. And it's fun in different ways. It's all about that almost alchemical magic way of sticking through its brilliant mid-corner balance that fizzes through you as you drive, giving you this incredible confidence to keep going. And you know what? If you don't like the engine, go and buy a second-hand Cayman. It's pretty damn good, and it'll save you 20 grand or something like that. In fact, the more you think about it, the more you drive it, the more it starts to make sense. Maybe underneath all this, it turns out there is such a thing still as a basic, attainable, affordable Porsche that we can all dream of. You'd have to go a very long way to buy a 911 that felt quite as fun to drive as this one. And then there's the fact that it has over 400 litres of luggage space. So in fact, this is an affordable hatchback. This or a Kia? I know which one I'm having.